have some vacancies on this council, and those vacancies will not count against the quorum because they're just that, vacancies at this point. I don't believe we have anyone on the line, so, because it's not allowed. So we will take a roll for those who are in attendance.
Chair Taylor.
Here.
Mayor Blackwell doesn't appear to be here as of yet. Stephen Cavanis.
Here, excuse my short.
Reverend Ken Chalker.
Here.
Colleen Cotter.
Here.
Habiba Grimes.
Here.
Dr. Heidi Gullett.
Here.
Dr. Charles Modlin does not appear to be here as of now. Levine Ross. Glenn Shoemate.
Here.
Sheila Wright just texted me she's unable to attend the meeting. Janice Contreras has an excused absence, as does Randall McShepard, Marsha Maccabee, and Yanela Sims.
We did 15.
So
So we're, all right, so we're at quorum. Good. Well, thank you, everyone, for your attendance. As I mentioned, we've got a few guests, but as you look at the agenda, if there are items that are not on the agenda that you'd like to talk about today, these forms, while publicly produced, we want you to have an opportunity to say what it is that you are thinking as we go through this discussion. Thank you again to the county executive for joining us. We're going to hear from him in just a moment. So, we'll start with a moment of silence.
Sure. August 28th of 1963, 60 years ago, was a turning point in the tumultuous history of the United States of America. More than 250,000 people used their feet, their voices, and their commitment to end police brutality, to end economic injustice, to ensure voting rights for all, and to provide quality and equity in housing and education. On August 28, 1963, over 250,000 people were the catalyst for the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. I was not born then, but I learned of the history and the significance of the march from my family. And I know that literally those 250,000 people are the reason many of us sit at this table today. 60 years later, we may feel dismay, cynicism, and despair with what's happening across the United States. Laws, policies, and practices ban books. There's critical race theory, wokeness, anti-LGBTQ rhetoric and practices, the recent Supreme Court Dobbs decision overturning Roe v. Wade, selective constitutional interpretations of the First and Second Amendments, which are not applicable to all, and most recently, the horrific, racially motivated murder of 3 Black individuals at a Dollar General store in Jacksonville, Florida. Nevertheless, I know we must remain purposeful, vigilant, fearless, and energized to continue the work of those 250,000 people. Our work can and will make a difference. So in the words of Dr. King, let us not wallow in the valley of despair. Instead, let us recommit and pledge to invest the time and to continue our work. Collectively, we must pledge to make our dream a reality. We can take a moment.
As always, thank you, Clerk Bird, for thoughtful and stirring reflections. Before we get started, given anything you've heard, thank you, Dr. Modlin, for joining, so the record could reflect
Yes, it will.
his appearance. Any thoughts before we get started around the agenda, what you just heard? Anything else that's stirring your thinking at this point? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all once again. County Executive?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. Thanks for being here, and it's good to see you back. I know we have a couple of guests as speakers today, and welcome all. I'm just going to reflect, since you opened up the door to reflection, on a Saturday morning gathering that Nayla and I were both at, organized by one of our committee members, Marsha Maccabee. Urban League hosted a reenactment of the March on Washington, Jobs and Freedom, and it was powerful. We were able to hear from speakers just as happened in 63. I think there were 18 speakers, and Dr. King may have been the 16th speaker. There was a number of speakers who spoke from local leadership positions, Randall McShepard, another member of our committee, and it was just a great gathering of friends. So we were all kind of uplifted by a 7-year-old young lady named Avery who found a way to get herself on the podium and the stage, and she stole the show in all the ways that a kid who's 7 years old would in her reflections of Dr. King's speech. And I think we need to find her and start working on her campaign for governor someday. But anyways, it was a beautiful day, and I know we have some potential people watching us from other places. I wanted to thank Marcia for her foresight to organize, and I wanted to thank all those that marched in the remembrance of 60 years. And really the message of the day was that we have work yet to do, and we all know that. And I think that's, again, reflective of why we're here. And the proceeding through the downtown really mattered too, because anybody that was out there also saw the Lawrenceville Heights Marching Band at their best, and it was a wonderful day. The very next day, the very same band played in a march through Rockefeller Park on Martin Luther King Boulevard when One World Day hosted the 77th coming together of people from all backgrounds in Cleveland. There were 53 delegates from 53 different nations and the Cultural Gardens. It was quite an event that really nicely kicked off what's coming up in Welcoming Week, where we welcome newcomers, and 15 different nations were represented by 25 persons who became naturalized citizens from their country of origin. They came into the park and they walked out U.S. citizens. So powerful 2 days in Cleveland over the weekend, and I just wanted to reflect on that. And the third reflection, and then I'll get into some things more specific to what I had thought last week before all these week's events happened, but I wanted to thank Will Tarter, who's out here today. The Center for Community Solutions hosted the Human Services Action Network, and we began to bring out the county budget for 24-25. Appreciate you and the team at Community Solutions hosting that, but we had probably 50 some nonprofits in the audience, and I just was reflecting on this on the way in. Our frontline partners, as we operationalize a $1.6 billion budget for Cuyahoga County and its 1.2 million citizens, I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize the frontline partners who often we find ways to bring some of that county budget to them so that they can do the frontline work in the community. It's never enough, I think, for our nonprofit partners, and they go about the business of trying to source the gaps. But that partnership of the nonprofits working with the public sector and the private sector, I've always said we've missed a beat when we say the public-private partnership. It needs to be the public-private nonprofit partnership, because they're just such an extraordinary part of how we administer county business. So thanks, Will, and all that hosted that. Mr. Chair, I wanted to focus on one thing particularly today, but I want to thank you and the committee chairs that were able to attend. I got a better briefing an hour ago. I'm going to say better. I was better educated when I needed to be on the work that the committees have done over a number of years, but met with the Equitable Quality of Life Subcommittee, the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee, Communications Subcommittee, and Health and Healthcare Subcommittee, and Criminal Justice Subcommittee. I think we're in search of a chair, and we'll talk more about that as well. But it was good to get just sort of a baseline of the work that's already been done. And I offered, and it's specific to Criminal Justice Subcommittee, some hopes I have to the chair and to the committee chairs. When we at county have been under the very difficult endeavor to contemplate what to do about a very dated county jail, and I say that really with an eye on having gone through it in the first week of this administration. It is unfit, and I don't wake up, as those of you who've known me a while, I don't wake up every day thinking, gee, I want to build a jail today. I don't, because it's just I want to work with all of you on the upstream work to minimize the need for jail beds and persons who occupy them. And having taken that tour the first week of my administration, I did think that we should outright, in addition to the upstream work, minimize the number of days it takes to get anybody to ever have to be in that facility. In other words, we do need to provide a more humane space. And I'm in the process, working with county council, to develop that plan. But I have said to everybody who listens, excuse me, that there needs to be concomitant work in areas of justice and not just a jail. So while under, thank you, sir, under all the provisions that put us in the position to build a jail, we need to work on the upstream work. So what I asked the committee at lunch, the committee chairs, to just think about are some things that our staff has been focused on. And these are not, it's not an exclusive list, but I really would like to think about working through the work of this committee on furthering bail reform. We just haven't come far enough. And if we can do more with the bail project and others to really identify how we can significantly move the needle on bail reform, I'd like to do that with you. And not only you, but you. I'd like to further a conversation we've had about a justice expediter and work with the group to realize a vision of having persons working in the jail who can help move persons out of there faster. And I frankly know there are people in this community who do that right now. Kareem Hinton comes to mind from Black Lives Matter, that he's in and out of the jail all the time trying to expedite the work. But there needs to potentially be somebody in the public sector that's doing that work with you. Legal Aid does that work, and I want to complement, not duplicate, work that you guys are doing. Pre-trial detention, we had a meeting in the not too distant past with Greater Cleveland the congregation GCC. I am sold that the point of view about too many people spending too many days in detention pre-trial has got to change. And so working on pre-trial services work, I'd like to work with you and the GCC and others on minimizing the number of days in pre-trial, and obviously that includes working with judges and intermediaries. And the fourth thing is learning and being inspired by, may not be a one-size-fits-all, but the Shaker Heights model of co-response. I was impressed with the outtakes from the first 2 quarters of Shaker Heights experience deploying where and when appropriately dispatched a mental health worker or social worker, both on site to an incident, to help with trauma, and to help with de-escalation. So I said to David Weiss, the mayor, like to see what you do and see if we could scale this to some other communities. The fifth, which is off my own notes, but is I want to talk more about reentry, both at a youth, juvenile reentry and adult, and need to spend some more time on the matters of reentry, and then I'm going long. A sixth, diversion. I don't think it's going to be enough in this community to have a single diversion center at 55th. So anything I propose in the future isn't mutually exclusive to that one particular facility, which is starting to see more numbers in terms of persons entering the facility, which is good news. But I think we're potentially going to need more than the singular facility. So on diversion, I want to work with you guys on what the appropriate diversion opportunities are as well. So I mentioned just briefly, or not so briefly, 6 items all referent to justice, and those aren't the only items referent to justice. There's so much more, and frankly, the work of these committees within this body. But I bring those today because it's on my mind as we propose to County Council in less than 3 weeks a jail plan, that it cannot just be a jail. It's got to be about programmatic work way upstream that changes lives before persons ever get to the jail. And I thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to bring those up. And I want to just, again, once again acknowledge there are already partners doing great work out there. I named a couple, and there are also many more programs that relate to depopulating the numbers of persons entering our criminal justice system. So that's what I bring today, and I thank you for
No,
the time.
thank you. That was certainly well thought out, and we appreciate the fact the list has grown in some ways, but in a good way, because these are all efforts that are being undertaken to, as you said, minimize or at least reduce the number of beds in any jail that might be built. Reverend Chalker, we know that as a subcommittee member, you spent a lot of time thinking about this, as others have, but I'd invite any questions of the county executive you might have around these 6 items, the jail itself, or anything else on this, that subject or other subjects you heard recently in the news that affect the county with respect to this work, the work of CASE. And that includes guests. If Mr. Tarter or others, if you have any thoughts, certainly feel free.
I
Dr.
just say, I
Motley.
mean, since Metro Health, as you know, obviously operates the medical facility in the jail, let us know how we can be of service, and we have the new behavioral health hospital in Cleveland Heights, so, yeah, anything we can do to facilitate.
Thank you, Dr. Melvin. Thank you.
What's the attitude now of the various judges relative to bail reform and how they implement it? One of the things that our committee discovered in our interviews was that many people are absolutely supportive of bail reform, but an individual judge in his or her court presides over almost a small kingdom. And if they're not on board with a total combined effort, we won't get very far.
So it's difficult for me to speak for any one judge, but I have had a conversation with the administrative court presiding judge, Brendan Sheehan, and his attitude toward kind of taking a check-in on ourselves is that perhaps there should be a comprehensive performance measure that's broad, that explores all aspects of the justice system, pretrial and beyond. And I would not mind taking him up on that. It sounds like an audacious task, but we're talking about everything from the work of our incident management to whether or not we're following protocol to potentially use the diversion center to, okay, if somebody is brought to the jail, then what is what are the barriers to pretrial exit if it's appropriate, and what are the barriers to moving a docket expeditiously? He seemed open to and brought up the idea of a performance measure of all of our aspects of this. So I appreciated that open door from administrative court judge, and going to pursue it.
Other questions? General thoughts? We're not aware of any public comments. I'm sorry.
So one thing you didn't mention, but is very related to some of these topics, is the issue of driver's license suspensions, especially for issues that are not related to driving, debt-related driver's license suspensions, which lead to prosecution and that whole spiral. And the data on that, at Legal Aid, we commissioned a study that we released last year that indicates the racial implications of far more Black people lose their driver's license for things that have nothing to do with driving and then have criminal convictions. So I just want to plant that seed. It's clearly an issue that the county does not have total control over, but in terms of policies within the county and collaboration with state lawmakers, it's a huge issue, especially private debt that the state then takes on to be a debt collector through the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, and resulting in very few dollars actually being recouped, lots of money spent by the state, and lots of people who end up losing their driver's license and in jail.
Social costs are probably upside down on that one.
Way upside down.
Relative to the
Yeah.
benefits. Thank you for bringing that up. As I said, I didn't even want to tend to be covering the gamut of issues, but I
Totally.
think that's a great
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
And also, back to Dr. Modlin's point, there's no shortage of partners who have said, let us be partners in a design. And again, I come back to, it's not just a design of a brick and mortar facility, it's an ecosystem design of better practices. It's a great example, but Metro itself, Dr. Steed brought it up, me and Dr. Modlin. So, am I allowed to
Yeah,
acknowledge my
yeah,
colleague? Also
absolutely.
wanted to say that
We were gonna do that, but
Councilwoman Conwell's here.
please,
Okay,
you can
well, I just appreciate
take
the
the
work
thunder.
with
Just grab it.
Councilwoman Yvonne Conwell. She was great yesterday at the Health Human Services Action Network on our budget, but as our HHS chair and also a member of many other committees, I think it goes without saying that there's a Justice Committee and there's an HHS committee. The two have to weave in and out, and I'm talking about Councilman Gallagher's committee. The actual name is Safety, right? But they have to weave together. And the majority of justice work, in my opinion, actually happens in the HHS committee. That's where it should. And also development, community development, people's workforce opportunities. So thanks for partnership.
Thank you. Councilwoman, you don't, any comments, certainly feel free at any time. Any other, as I said, there are no public comments we're aware of. Any other thoughts from folks in attendance?
Chair Taylor and County Executive, appreciate again your thoughts and perspective. And I think extending kind of the second responder and shaker and looking at it at the county level, also wonder about other ways in which the county might help facilitate, set examples around other best practices, if that's what you will, the county is already have in place and committee around equity. I think about something like purchasing, inclusion policies, and how many municipalities probably don't have the bandwidth or the capacity or the knowledge, and with expertise and professionalism of the county, can that somehow be shared? I think Blackwell, we're here from Maple or other communities. I mean, those types of, they exist. How do we share them as additional models? And I think the county's in a, without per se cost, at least in a way to maybe help facilitate improvements.
Yes. Great point. It was something that we were reflecting on in the committee chair meeting just a few minutes ago, that if we can showcase a great practice that's out already in our region, and I agree with you, Glenn, that there are municipalities, government entities, nonprofits that are showing great work in being ahead of the curve on matters we're talking about in equity and DIA generally. And with all that, I had reflected, we go outside of the county often for best practices. Many often are in our front yard, and it's also we in this region, we sort of share the common geography, and so we should share the best practices that are local, already here locally.
Thank you, Chairman Taylor, and to the county executive. Thank you yesterday for attending. Will Tarter with Center for Community Solutions. I just want to publicly say thank you to the county executive and to Councilman Conwell for attending the meeting yesterday where we discussed the county budget. For the benefit of the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity, I will send a recording of the meeting to Clerk Berg to share with all of you as we did live stream and record the meeting. I'll also make sure I get it to the communications team at the county. It was extremely beneficial, very insightful, and I think speaks to many of the things that the county executive spoke about on the intersection between health and human services, racial disparities, and the impact that it has in the justice system. So thank you very much. I'll get that to the clerk after the meeting.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments? Well, thank you, County Executive. Do appreciate it. And look forward to this partnership. We know it will continue to grow and do good work on behalf of the citizens of this county and the county itself. So thank you very much. My comments I will delay until the end of the agenda, but they're going to be around this funding we've talked about for CASE for quite some time. We may not go into specifics, but I want you to know there are efforts underway to make good and prudent use of these allocated funds. The other component will be around leadership, right? You've heard about the subcommittee chair work. Some of you may want additional duties over the next number of years. We've got a renewal discussion we're going to have around terms ending for committee members here. So we'll go through that list, and then we'll talk about some other leadership alterations that we will make soon with respect to Case as well. So we'll delay that until the end of the agenda. So with that, we've got an approval of the minutes as new business. And
Okay. So the minutes from the March 27, 2023 meeting were distributed on April 13th for your review. Can I entertain a motion to approve the minutes, please? Thank you. Motion made by Member Schumate. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Member Grimes. Is there any discussion? Hearing or seeing no discussion, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries and the minutes are accepted. May I?
please.
Today, we are going to hear a presentation from Tanya Manise of Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. Tanya is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, and I was sharing with her, we were looking up, and if you'll just indulge me, a really quick, she doesn't want me to do this necessarily, but background about her, what I think is an incredible career. So Ms. Manise, I believe, moved to Shaker Heights when she was 4 years old. She's a graduate of Shaker Heights High School and the University of Virginia, which are who's, or Wahoos? Wahoos. After working in Dallas and Denver, she returned to Shaker Heights. She's previously served as the Director of Economic Development for the City of Shaker Heights and later as the Director of Community Development for the City of Cleveland. While there, she was responsible for the city's housing and neighborhood commercial redevelopment programs and the city's effort to develop neighborhood strategies. Ms. Manise currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer and President of Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, as I've mentioned. That organization was founded in 1988 by philanthropic, civic, and corporate leaders. It serves as the only local community development intermediary in our region. Their mission is to foster equitable revitalization throughout Cleveland's neighborhoods by strengthening community development ecosystems. Cleveland Neighborhood Progress was nationally highlighted as a leader for engaging in best practices in various processes or facets of nonprofit development. Ms. Manise, on behalf of Cuyahoga County, we welcome you here today, and please, the floor is yours.
My gosh, thank you after that introduction. Kind of hard. But I appreciate it. So I'm going to share some slides for about 15 minutes, I think, and then take questions, and hopefully we can have some discussion. And so I tried to really focus on tying the work that we do into the charter of this committee. Is it Nyla or Nayla?
It's 3 syllables, so it's actually Nayla.
Nayla. Okay,
Yep.
great.
Thank you.
Someone
though.
whose name is always mispronounced, and you did it. I'm sensitive to it.
I apologize.
Nayla.
Tell me how to say it,
No,
because
Oh, sorry. Now I started this.
No.
Tanya Maness. It's all good.
Maness.
Yes, but I really respond to anything. But I really wanted to go through and kind of speak to the mission of this organization, which, first and foremost is the equitable revitalization of neighborhoods. And that is, the core of our work. We really feel very strongly that we support community development corporations in neighborhoods because they're on the ground working directly with residents. And so, County Executive, I really appreciated your comments before about really leveraging the power of nonprofit groups in neighborhoods. Often it's because they are closest to constituents, and we feel really strongly about that at CNP. So, just a very brief background on the organization. I think the part that makes sense to speak to today is 3 years ago when I started at Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, we went through a strategic planning process, and we kind of refocused the organization on what it was really founded to do, which was to support the growth and the development of the community development corporations. And what I think, again, is really important to this committee is that really from 2010, 2012, post-foreclosure crisis, very understandably, CNP, foundations, government partners, everybody sort of said, you know what, we better not do housing and real estate development in the neighborhoods because there's been such devastation through the foreclosure crisis. I'm not really on my slides, I'm just talking now, so sorry about it. But I think the thing that happens when you do that, and what we've seen in the last 10 to 12 years, is the neighborhoods where we didn't rebuild the capacity of the community development corporations, where those CDCs weren't doing home repair and rehab, where they weren't supporting small businesses, they weren't making the connections to other partners, those neighborhoods, and that's why our work is so focused on them, the most disinvested neighborhoods in the city of Cleveland, at best stood still, but really fell backwards. And so the Mayor Bibb's Southeast Side initiative that focuses on the neighborhoods of Union Miles and Mount Pleasant, Buckeye that we were all already working on, and Lee Harvard really speaks to that. And then frankly, the red line communities in our communities still are the areas that most need support and where we're most focused. And I think that's one of the major commitments of our new strategic plan and the work we're doing, is those neighborhoods, which, again, I'm just gonna be really frank, right? Funders don't necessarily want to work in, banks don't really want to work in, because they are fraught with risk, right? There are issues with leadership, there are issues with capacity, and because they're harder to work in, and there's more chance that we're gonna fail, we haven't been. And the only way we're gonna really have a great Cleveland is if we focus on those neighborhoods. So our mission, I'll get back a little on track here, CDC's at the center, right? They're the core, they best understand what our neighborhoods need. And our work, it's nothing really sexy here, it's really the day in and day out of what we need to be doing, is helping them build their boards, helping to build leadership. I think it's a real testament to community development that many of the leaders in our community are people who've come from community development corporations. Our county executive, Chris Alvarado, who is just leaving Slavic Village, who was working with you, Mayor Blackwell, some, is joining the county. The Chief of Integrated Development at the City of Cleveland, our head of Planning Commission. But what that says is we have quite a pipeline to rebuild at the CDCs, and really CNP and many other partners took our eye off the ball on that, right? We have not invested in people, and fundamentally this work is people. It is about giving them the training, the development they need, the support they need to do the work. Outside of that center circle is really the rest of our team. We've spent a lot of energy on building core, we call an equitable neighborhood revitalization team. So we have subject matter expertise around real estate, economic development, workforce development, sustainability, parks and open space. And really those handful of staff on our team are really there to support the community development corporations and then to make connections into partners that aren't place-based, but that, partners like the Urban League, like the Hispanic Business Center that's on this board, many of the workforce development partners, right? So that those resources can really reach residents in neighborhoods. I'll speak to in a little bit the advocacy work, because that's one of the main pieces, I think, to the equity work you're doing that is worth talking about. And then access to capital. So we have a community development finance institution, Village Capital Corporation, that's a wholly owned subsidiary of CNP. And it's really there to help bridge the gap in lending, where we really are trying to get to the point, we always kind of joke, we're all trying to put ourselves out of business, right? If the private market, if the lending market, if we had banks writing mortgages and investing in our small businesses, much of the work that we do, we wouldn't need to do. We'd still need to build community. We'd still be working on a lot of the things that make our places great places to live, but not quite that. Okay, next slide. So I've really covered a lot of things. So I started to talk about this a little bit. We really needed to refocus on our community development partners. And over the last year, we restructured our organization so that we have 4 relationship managers focused on the 17 or so neighborhood CDCs. And day in and day out, we're just asking ourselves, what can we do to strengthen this ecosystem so they can really be the delivery mechanism into the neighborhoods? Because I think we are really honest with ourselves as an intermediary and with our partners that we're not there right now, right? We are a really important part of this puzzle, and we have a lot of work to rebuild to get there. You can go to the next slide. One of the things, we use this visual a lot, we used it with City Council as we started talking to them about this process, is that we realized that part of the reason why expectations were often not met with CDCs, and I kind of feel like I'm like the Wheaties woman, girl, like, CDCs are expected to do this much, they're apt, best apt to do this much, and they're funded to do this much. And so we're inherently gonna be letting people down when that's the case. So you can go to the next slide. one of the things that we were clear on what we needed to do is we needed to define our industry ourselves, right? Everybody was telling us what they needed from us, but what we had happened and what had happened even more during during COVID is we had started to fill a lot of the gaps, which were just necessary. Like we were delivering food and computers to seniors and to school children, and we started taking out a lot of the social service elements that we are happy to see the county saying, hey, listen, we're going to take more control over those. But to define who we were and to move away from what's inherently been a competitive grant system to what really an intermediary should be doing, which is a much more consultative support of how do we look at the gaps in your neighborhood, how do we look at the gaps in your organization and not penalize you for them, but help you build them, and then realize that in our neighborhoods that are struggling the most and our neighborhoods that need the most, we are inherently going to have bigger gaps. And it shouldn't be rocket science to realize that, but it's been a self-fulfilling prophecy that where we've had the most need, we've unfortunately inherently invested the least. You can go to the next slide. I don't know that, so we went through, and I'm actually going to skip a little bit of this. We went through a year-long process of doing that definition. You can go to the next slide. We, not surprisingly, looked at some major buckets of where, again, inherently CDC should be working more on building place and then partnering with others. Go to the next slide. This one really speaks to where we saw the break point, right, with how we work with the City of Cleveland. These are the main buckets where CDC should be working, and where you see the check boxes, that's where community development block grant funding can support. And so inherently we have a mismatch. We have organizations that we are relying to deliver services, and very few of those things that really help make that process work. So if you can't do a neighborhood plan, it's very difficult to know where you should be doing home repair. But the current system doesn't fund building that neighborhood plan. So again, it's just been very important for people to understand the break points in our ecosystem. Go ahead to the next slide. So that really fed to the neighborhood platform work. During the mayoral race, city council race, and then we kind of brought this with First Suburbs into the county race, we started looking at a few of the most important priorities for the community. One of them, and I'm sorry, the context here is important, was really looking at the funding model for the community development corporations. And what this slide shows is that where Cleveland was really building, where we were building new homes, we were investing in neighborhoods, were the years where there was the most dollars coming into the community development system, late 90s, early 2000s. Today in real dollars, so those are equivalent dollars, it wasn't like there was $1.47 million going into the neighborhoods in 1996. But if you look in real dollars, we're funding these neighborhoods at about the same dollar amount, and there are just much greater problems, and we haven't really adjusted for inflation at all. So if you go to the next slide, one of the main priorities, we skipped something, but that's okay, I'll just speak to it, I understand, some of the hidden slides aren't showing up. Okay, one of the main priorities it's my fault, don't worry about it, my fault. One of the main priorities with the City of Cleveland now is to restructure this funding of CDCs. And we're 30 years in the making here. So we're talking about changing a funding model that's 30 years old. And as everyone can imagine, it's kind of a terrifying process, but we're really pleased that the City Council and administration are willing to at least look at this and acknowledge that we have a total disconnect in what we're doing today. So the other part in the neighborhood platform that was really important to residents was tied to the tax abatement study. And that's where the slide was the fact that when we went through and looked at tax abatement in the City of Cleveland, the biggest gap to people and the biggest issue was not the fact that tax abatement was being provided to incentivize the building of homes. The issue was that people in neighborhoods where there was a lot of investment were seeing that they were getting priced out of their homes because their taxes were going up at a really high rate. And we were committed, based on work that the Greater Ohio Policy Center had done and Enterprise Community Partners, that we would carry this work forward to the county and then to the state. Because today in the City of Cleveland, and I think think you can go to the next slide and hopefully we'll actually be there. Right now, the main issue is that we don't have state enabling legislation. So just like with tax abatement, the state allows you to do a certain amount of tax abatement. We are really advocating with the state that that local jurisdictions can make their own decisions on if in a certain area within their jurisdiction, taxes are going up a disproportionate amount because of appreciation, which we all want, right? We want appreciation of housing, that jurisdiction can say if it's increasing by X percentage, if you're at a certain income level, if you're a certain age level. So we're working really hard to just have that state enabling legislation get passed. There's actually a good amount of momentum for that because home builders themselves don't want to be coming into neighborhoods where people are opposing what they're doing because they are worried about displacement. The Mortgage Bankers Association wants to see something like this passed because what they really want is for people to be able to stay in their homes. And I think if you go to the next slide, what we are arguing is that we're going to deal with the same issues, and it is about reducing taxes to our local schools, to the counties. And this is why I wanted to talk about this, because this directly affects the county more broadly. But the fact is that when we displace seniors and people who generally have paid off their homes and now taxes have gone up, we're creating problems that then are going to cost us money. And chances are those homes are going to be vacant, and the schools and the other jurisdictions are going to lose those dollars. So that's the kind of, it's just a good example of the kind of advocacy work that we do. Is typically it's an issue that's been raised up from the neighborhoods that we've been asked to take a lead on. It's very specific to residents, or it's something that the CDCs are most asking us to do. The last piece that we spend a lot of energy on is trying to bring state dollars into Cleveland. One of the main, probably the big wins that we just had was to raise $3 million of state dollars for middle neighborhoods. That's an area, and I'm not even going to worry about slides. I think it's in there somewhere. But middle neighborhoods are neighborhoods where we typically have not needed investment. They're stable neighborhoods. It's Old Brooklyn, Lee Harvard, Collinwood, most of West Park, high home ownership. Generally, there have been no tools for those neighborhoods because we have spent most of our time and energy, as we should, on our most disinvested neighborhoods. But these are neighborhoods now where if we don't start investing in the housing, if we don't strengthen the commercial corridors, we are going to continue to lose residents. We have to give residents a reason, who have middle-class residents who do have the dollars, who could choose, frankly, to live in other places of the county, but also to live in Lake County and Geauga County and others, reasons to stay in Cleveland, right? And I think as a whole, reasons to strengthen the neighborhoods that are sort of starting to tip in the wrong direction so that they don't become neighborhoods that need generational change. And so one of the, I think, most exciting parts about this middle neighborhoods work is it's matched by the city of Cleveland, which we're really excited about. So it's the largest investment in neighborhoods in Cleveland that's not federal dollars, which is huge. And we think we can continue to get more support from the state to do this maybe more broadly in Cuyahoga County and in other parts of the state, because it resonates with people. It's kind of middle neighborhoods, is main streets and side streets. It's a message that people understand, and in a time when everything feels very divisive, it's nice to have something that a lot of our representatives from more rural or small town areas in the state can enjoy. So I'm going to stop talking because I think I've gone past 15 minutes, and I really enjoy taking some questions, and I also somehow screwed up my slides. So
Just on that last point,
Yeah.
is that a pilot that you're doing with the state? That gave $3 million to show that they could get more in the future?
well, so it is part of the state operating budget, and then it's another $7.3 million from the city of Cleveland. And we have very good data from the city's neighborhood typology that was done with CASE and with many other partners to really hone in on specific areas where you're literally looking at a few block groups where you're seeing kind of that switch from areas where banks are lending, where neighborhoods are pretty healthy, to if we could strengthen this commercial district and begin to invest in a certain amount of housing We really think that we'd have the typically you need the 6 appraisals that would then get the market lending. So it's not exactly a pilot. I mean, we have, I think, good data and good information, but it is right now the largest middle neighborhoods investment in the country.
Thank you, Ms. Maness. Any other, please, Mayor?
Sorry for being late. On the property tax issue, is there been any discussion regarding the homestead exemption, adjusting that so that those that have paid and our seniors are not really worried about losing their home because the property tax appreciation says.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I think that, and I'm not gonna do as good a job of this, but the homestead exemption is not kept up at all with inflation, which I think is what you're alluding to, and it's complicated to apply. And we don't feel like it's gone far enough, and so, what you see in different other parts of the country, something called LOOP, long time owner occupancy protection. There's also something called the circuit breaker, which looks at any low-income person, which is what you have in Michigan, that if your property taxes increase by X percentage and you are at a certain income level, you can apply for an exemption for a certain amount of time, and I think it's 6 years in Michigan. But this initial piece is to have state enabling legislation, so then cities and counties and municipalities themselves can say, okay, what's appropriate for our community? And so like the state enabling legislation, kind of like tax abatement, would have some basic parameters, like, you can't apply if you're over a certain percentage of AMI. So we are not inadvertently supporting people who don't need the help at all, right? It could be that you have to own your home for a certain amount of years, or that you are a certain age. But we are advocating for something that is not just about age, because we know a lot of people, the two things tend to overlap, but there are exceptions where that's not the case.
Mr. Chair, I'm ex officio, right? I'm allowed to.
You're allowed to.
Can I mean, I don't want to. I don't want to
Good
get
SUV
in the middle of your meeting, but it's great to be here and hear you, Tanya. Just one thing, kind of related to the mayor's point. We are interested in the administration in learning more about the circuit breaker program, because that's come up a few times, and also back to homestead exemption, knowing it hadn't gone far enough. We always will ally with you to be partners at the state to talk more with them. My other questions were, and I could talk further at another time about land bank, but just kind of how much you guys interface with county land bank, if at all, on policy development. And I know city's got its work too as land bank. I am more and more intrigued by, and I don't know if I'm out on a limb on this, but the modular and manufactured home business, because of it seems we can keep costs at an affordable but still provide a very quality home experience. Are you doing anything in any of those arenas?
So I'll answer each one of those questions going back the other way. So very much will appreciate the support at the state level. We will get to a point where it's really important for Cuyahoga County to say, hey, this is important to us. Right now, still kind of laying the groundwork with representation from the state. There's nothing that we do without partners. And I would say the Cuyahoga County Land Bank, CHN Housing Partners, the CDC Network, LISC, Enterprise, those are probably the people we're talking to every day. And it is clearly, like the middle neighborhoods work, such a big part of that. And then looking at where you have to do repair and rehab work is connecting the CDC with those other resources and other partners so that they aren't trying to do everything themselves. And then, we are really interested in the modular home piece, because right now, as we're talking to people, to build a new home, $340,000, right? So that's never going to be affordable.
And to benchmark that, Chair, into all the Franklin County's started to endeavor in this, because they've been dealing with gentrification. They're trying to keep people on, it's keeping their own community. And the modular home market, to your point about $300,000+ homes, it's in the 185 range. I mean, it might still be expensive depending on the market you're in, but it's markedly better priced.
And I think the last piece of which we know, right, is part of the reason we are all, the city of Cleveland and partners and First Suburbs focused on rehabbing homes and renovating homes, is because those tend to be the most affordable homes for people. It's also, from a climate resiliency perspective, much better if we can reinvest in what we have. Then the other challenge is that when we tear down homes in many of our neighborhoods, there isn't the comps to build a new house. That modular home could be the bridge, right?
Thanks.
Just after that, we have two.
Oh, do you?
Right,
Good.
you do.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We have the
Yeah.
two, so one sold from 89 in 30 days, the other sold from 191 in 45 days.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's great.
And we're looking to build historically was Ambassador and President's Row, which is the only place lives. That has been an option for us. It's worked. really
That's a follow-up with you.
Yes, Glenn?
Just, you referenced the City of Cleveland tax abatement study. Any takeaways or highlights there, and in particular, that which may relate to county's role or opportunity in abatement projects and, I don't know, good, bad, plus, minus kind of way?
Well, I think the best thing that came out of the tax abatement study was really an understanding from the city of Cleveland, and I think the county is ahead of this point, that there needed to be a broader housing and investment study. That everything in the city of Cleveland was managed by tax abatement, and they're trying to get everything to work through that. So it prompted what Mayor Jackson started and Mayor Bibb finished and is carrying out now is a 10-year housing plan for the city of Cleveland. Again, I think that that's already something that, and then now with Sarah Parks Jackson as the director, you have a department focused on it. The other piece I think that's important is this neighborhood typology idea, and really having people understand throughout our neighborhoods, it's not an either-or decision more often than that. It's different tools to be utilized in different areas. So to Mayor Blackwell's point, there are areas where it makes so much sense to bring in modular homes, and other areas of your community where you can still build a new house. And the need to have a strategy across the board and incentivize different interventions in different places. Overall, I think the city of Cleveland's going in the right direction of really evaluating what are the appropriate tools in what neighborhoods, and looking to see areas where tax abatement is not needed anymore. The current market with costs, I don't know that that's quite true, but really trying to then incentivize development in areas, in these middle neighborhoods, areas that haven't seen the kind of development, and I would say that's probably true for a lot of our first suburbs.
Is there a final question? Well, thank you very much. That was
Really appreciate the
very enlightening
opportunity.
for all of us, I'm sure, and thank you for those who are already participating and wanted to learn more. So, Ms. Vanessa. So next, we will have a presentation from the Department of Equity and Inclusion, Director Lenora Locke.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to give an overview of what the Department of Equity and Inclusion has accomplished in 2023 and what we plan to do for the remainder of the year. I do have a PowerPoint. Next slide. Again, the Department of Equity and Inclusion was created in 2021. Next slide, we have specific goals that are outlined in the county code that relate to, for example, increasing MBEWB participation, working with Department of Human Resources to change our culture to be more inclusive. Next slide, that's just to name a few. It also details one of the biggest tasks that we complete related to supplier diversity, which is the disparity study. And it also outlines some partners that we generally interact, work with, or have aligned, have missions or focuses that are aligned with advancing equity. Next slide. Right now, the Department of Equity and Inclusion is budgeted for 9 FTEs, and as of late July, we were at full capacity. Similar to other departments, we've had a significant turnover. So again, we have 9 FTEs just since January. We've hired and basically replaced 4 contract compliance officers and promoted our senior contract compliance officer. So out of 9, we've had more than 50% turnover. So I say that to be happy that we're at 9, but also to celebrate that my staff, they come in and they have to keep hit the ground running. Next slide.
Director, do you mind if we ask
Oh, go
questions
ahead.
along the way?
No, go ahead.
So 9, right? The head count has grown, and I assume they're all busy. But describe their day, right? How do we get to so many compliance officers? I'm looking for what is strategic inside of that.
So
those roles, that group of individuals. So can you go back to the prior? Yes.
So we have 1 administrative assistant and 2 supervisors. That includes me and then the senior contract compliance officer who supervises 6 compliance officers. For comparison, the Office of OEO for the City of Cleveland, which focuses on supplier diversity, has about 6 or 7 people. So we're with 9 doing supplier diversity plus workforce equity and also policies and programs and training. A typical day for a contract compliance officer is going to be a mix of different areas. They might have, for the supplier diversity program, they might be doing pre-proposal, pre-bid meetings to provide overviews for bidders on the diversity goals. There may have been a bid or RFP or RFQ that closed, so now they're doing the evaluation of the participation or compliance by those prime vendors with that. And that means also includes calling the bidders listed on the good faith efforts to, did you receive this call? Did you receive this auction? It'll also include preparing for many of our different programs that I'll discuss that may be simply looking up data and research best practices, some of the logistics, setting up the meetings, the locations, things of that sort. So it could be a mix. Also, we do outreach. So while, for example, today, this is internal for me, but at 3, there's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They're having a construction project, so our compliance officers will be there for that outreach. We participated in, I believe, the Hispanic Business Chambers did a program at Max Hayes. That was another program that we did outreach. And then we have our own outreach programs. So it's a mix.
Yeah, it's soup to start to finish, right, for them, not just the supplier diversity, but procurement, all the other things. And these are sometimes community-facing, out in the community
Yes.
activities for these officers? Okay, all right.
I guess I'll add to that, and the one thing I'm curious about is so proportionately, how much of your staff's time is community-facing versus navigating internal departments? Because I know you do the forecasting, right, with the various departments, and that's more intentional. You didn't do it before. So I guess, what would you say is their time commitment with both of those efforts?
So if we separate and define community as non-county employee internal policy, I would say it's probably at least 50% because we're dealing with vendors, which are part of the community. We're dealing with companies that want to get certified, and we're also doing outreach. It's not as much grassroots as we would like. That's more in the area of the policies and programs that we're starting and venturing into, and that would be more leverage with departments who already have an initiative that's focused on, for instance, health and human services with their various divisions, and then you have the sheriff's department with their various interactions with the community. So ours would be a little more topic-based and or supporting those different initiatives.
A comment just a minute on
Please.
it.
You don't have to.
No, I was thinking
Yeah,
about this
protocol.
too when you
That's
asked the question. Thank you. And I did just want to say, Lenora has been out internal doing a lot of outreaching within the, Director Lockett has been doing this with our team, and it much appreciated at all levels, in the executive office and everybody in this building. But I would say when we look at the org chart, I can understand the question if I was reading into it a little bit. Is and I'll use a couple of departments in the same vein. We, and our HR director, Sarah, is here as well. But if you look at that, you think 100% of the work is compliance, monitoring, measuring, and where is the outreach? So she just explained that there is outreach at a high percentage by each employee, but sometimes job classifications are sort of a regimented classification that don't directly describe what the real work is.
Right.
That being said, I thought myself, where's the other side of the org chart? And I think if in the spirit, we're probably all on the same page. We got to keep outreaching internally and externally, more like you're already doing, but the resources to do that and the strategy. And the other group I'll bring up, just because I've thought the same in their world, is our economic development department. There's a lot of what looks on paper like just loan compliance work, and you need to do origination work when you're trying to cultivate small business or trying to make sure that we are working on minority business development. And So duly noted, because maybe I can do something about this with our council and others. And point being, just relax some of these titles a little bit and make them really speak to what the work really is. I know, right? Yeah, thanks.
And that may be in process, because by us being a new division, we were started with the foundation, the supplier diversity component, which the majority was contract compliance. Then the roles expanded with the legislation. But then as part of expanding the details for the job description, the employees have to prepare CPQ. And part of that CPQ process is detailing what percentage of time is dealt on this area, what percentage of time is dealt in this area, what's the level of tools, education needed, and then they have a review, and that goes before the PRC. And we're in that process, so these titles that are here could,
No, understood. So it may look different, starkly
It's a good
different when
point you raised.
the time comes, because that looks unhealthy from an operational standpoint, for me at least. Okay, yes.
Director Lockett, when's the next disparity study scheduled?
yes, we're looking to start the process for that in 2024.
So probably be reported in 25 or late 24?
The goal would be at least 12 to 18 months, our goal. But it depends on the response from the applicants.
And is there a way between the 5-year marks to get indicators or measures, or any way of knowing what new policies that have been implemented have had any impact, or is it literally just you have to wait the full 5-year cycle to understand? Is there any other?
That's something we can take into account if we want to pay for a mid-report, but it's still, the disparity study is a third party's analysis of our process, so it would have to be a mid-cycle evaluation.
So might there be benchmarks, i.e. number of certified businesses or outreaches or any other metrics around equity or inclusion that we would know within an annual basis of county spend towards SBEs, MBEs, FBEs? Is there a way to?
So we provide, as part of the annual equity report, there are metrics in there on what's certified, who was certified, what was the spend in those areas.
Good, you have more slides,
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead. So again, we know that to be successful, we want to make sure we're being accountable, that we're addressing inequities, systemic inequities, that we're building capacity, that's through training and webinars and ways to empower our staff, employees, leadership, and also community engagement. We look at 3 areas that we try to do initiatives. That's in supplier diversity, workforce equity, and policies and programs. Next slide. So this year, one of the programs that we implemented is the DEI What's Next initiative. Last year, we did the GARE survey. We had more than 2,300 employees that completed that survey. One of the key findings of that survey was that employees, while they may be aware of what initiatives or tasks are occurring within their work area or their division for equity, they're not as aware the further it gets from their day-to-day job duties. So one of the initiatives with the What's Next initiative is to speak to all levels of the employees. So we're looking at providing 2 annual events. March is when we'll provide an overview to employees to say, this is what we did last year, the county, and this is what county departments have committed to doing next year. And that time is picked in March because the annual equity report must be posted by the end of January. So again, we want to keep the employees engaged with, this is what the county did last year, this is what we plan to do this year. 6 months later, we want to follow in September with a webinar that's based on what we feel that the employees have a desire for. So in this September, the webinar that we're going to focus on with What's Next is about microaggressions and mental health. We worked with the Department of Communication. They did a brief survey as part of the In the Know. And the number 1 topic that they wanted to learn more about from DEI was mental health and well-being. And the number 3 topic was microaggressions. And as you are aware, those are pretty much they're linked, microaggressions and mental health. So that's the sessions that we'll have in September. Next slide. This year, we also did a mid-year equity summit in June. Most DEI programs that are successful have both a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. The focus of the mid-year equity summit was on county leadership. We were honored to have comments by the county executive and county council president Jones. There were more than 50 county executive directors and leaders that attended that summit. That was a half-day summit. Some of the topics that we dealt with was in equity in general, and looking specifically how we can improve equity related to race and age, even age as a diversity component. One last component was going to be gender, but we got beyond time. So again, that was the mid-year equity summit. That was in June. Next slide, please. We followed that up in July with the County Vendor Pitch Day and Fair. This was a collaboration with the Department of Purchasing. We had representatives from our largest purchasing departments, Development, Department of IT, HHS, Human Resources, Public Works, and the Sheriff's Department. We timed this to occur in July because semi-annually the county does a forecast that we update January and July 1st. So we wanted to have the pitch day occur in early July so that vendors can come, meet with the actual department leadership on what they plan to buy, find out about the forecast. We also at the event provided staff there to so that they get face-to-face assistance with registering in our Info Supply portal, get questions on how to get certified, how to submit a bid, and they can get face-to-face. We're coming out of COVID, so people might be tired of Zoom and webinars. If you are better with face-to-face questions and getting assistance, that was an opportunity to
Not
get that
for
assistance
today,
there.
but to Mr. Shoemate's earlier question, maybe of the 100 who attended, give us some outcomes, right? How many did get X, Y, or Z? How many did apply?
I could
So
follow
that
up
we
with
can
that.
know the effectiveness, quite honestly. Because
Mhm.
we're always after improvement. We want to grow the number to 300 or 400, but we also want to see that it's making a difference. So not for today, but if we could, that'd be great. Please.
Next slide. So again, the county pitch day was in July. It was a one-day event that was face-to-face. We know that there's always ongoing assistance from vendors. While a vendor department or business can call us any day during our business hours and get assistance, we still wanted to provide that opportunity monthly. So on the fourth Thursday of every month from 10 to 11, we have committed staff that can, again, provide that service to vendors virtually. Okay, so we had our first one just last week. It'll be the fourth Thursday of every month. Continue. So last year, we did the DEI training. It was our first time doing a mass training for all county executive agencies. We did not, at that time, because of budget constraints, we provided what we thought was a good slate of classes for managers and leadership, and also all staff. We tried to provide a good flexibility of time. For instance, the town halls, we had 3 classes. They were provided 7 different times of the day, hours to provide that flexibility. But as we all know, that there still were people who were not able to finish for various reasons. We were able this year, direction of the new leadership, to get the opportunity to amend that contract with Tri-C to provide a short makeup sessions, a few makeup sessions in each of those categories this year. It also includes train-the-trainer component that will enable staff from DEI and HR for us to be able to sustainably provide that going forward in 2024. So this year we are providing 4 makeup sessions for the management DEI training that was provided last year by Tri-C, and also for the all-town
the training, I was just wondering, any key things about, in regards to how the employees, officers, and everything are going to learn? Is there anything that you can pull from it, just to get an idea of how well that went and if there was work further?
Well, a lot of some of the comments that I've received from a lot of they was felt that good about the opportunity to get the training, also to provide feedback themselves within those sessions, because the sessions were designed to be interactive and not just someone speaking at you. So there was feedback from that. As always, especially when you have a long history, the employees, people who took the training is that going to be a one-time incident, and then we're not going to go anywhere with it. We're not going to build upon it. It's not going to lead to any fruitful or tangible changes. So time will tell. That's where we're looking at. When I say that, I mean it's going to take all of us at all levels. And so that's why we built a lot of our initiatives to keep the engagement going. Most of at the point that we're at in society, now this is just my personal opinion, is that a lot of the low-hanging fruit is gone. We're at the point where we really have to dig deep and start looking at making the changes that need to be, to make changes. It's not as, I guess it's almost like when you first start a diet, you get rid of the one extra pop, stop the fast food, but then you hit the plateau and you really have to start looking at lifestyle changes, parking the car further. Similar with DEI, we have to take the time to do ahead work. It's not just setting the goals afterwards, it's setting up your procurement so the specifications are broad and still meets the county needs, but also provide flexibility of how a vendor can provide those services.
I guess too, I was just wondering, that you could pay leadership, just so they know what are some of the key areas that employees have issues with. Just something in writing that maybe.
Yes. So we did provide, for instance, the GARE survey is on the county intranet. Also, a summary of all the feedback that Tri-C received from the reviews is available on the county intranet.
So the point really is, you're in a data-rich situation, right, with this work that you're doing. So if you're sharing the data with the leadership, that's great. It'd be also wonderful if somehow that data, key themes and findings can be shared with this group. If it has to be controlled or contained, we get it. But it'd be wonderful to hear, maybe not the narrated terms, but the analytics around the work. So just something to keep in mind as we go forward. Any other questions? Is that your last slide?
Next slide was just talk about what was coming up. We still want to work at the end of the year on the County Leadership Academy, which will be workforce equity initiative to look at how we can help develop and promote opportunities for employees within the county. We have a lot of employees that, while we do have turnover, we do have a lot of employees who remain. So let's invest in our biggest asset so that they feel that they have opportunities here and that there are equitable ways that they can be promoted. Finally, and I did send a copy of the PowerPoint. These are included in the county's annual equity report, but while I just mentioned some of the initiatives that DEI specifically is working on, many county departments and agencies detailed actions that they were going to take this year to promote equity in their operations.
So I would just say a job well done in terms of activities and the commitments made, really from when we started this effort. So thank you very much. It has really come a long way. There is now the next iteration, right? That will, add another piece to this puzzle or equation. So look forward to that as well. Stephen?
I think you've done great work, and obviously there's much more to do. The one piece of legislation that you passed last year, I think, was the equity zones legislation. And I'm just curious how that work is going. And, you might not have to answer today, but I mean, in terms of the idea of having preference, right, to certain neighborhoods, I think is really critical to equity based on disinvestment. And so I'm just curious if we could go a little bit deeper on how folks are aligning internally to make sure that's executed.
Stephen, before she begins that, I just want to make sure that we're all clear that that wasn't, the equity zones was not legislation that was passed.
It wasn't
It was an
legislation?
executive order that was
Okay,
passed that Harlan signed, just
Sorry.
for semantics, do you know what I mean?
Okay.
Just, so it's in effect as,
important.
it's in effect as an executive
Yeah,
order right
okay.
now, and only because Laura and I
Okay.
drafted those, so I
Okay.
remember them, that's why.
Right. So, as you mentioned, the equity zones, policy and map was approved in 22. The departments moved forward, and similarly, those departments that moved forward are still using it this year. So you had Planning Commission, last year they used it for the tree canopy, they're using it for when they have application process. Public Works similarly. We also had the Consumer Affairs that was doing their policy, their storefront, the bag, the recycling bag, where they had a program where they were gonna help companies or businesses, small businesses, because of the impact of the countywide plastic bag ban, that they were gonna, by equity, use the equity zone criteria as one of the factors where they give grants or assistance to stores to help that. So there's continued use, and we will report the data. We haven't received the final numbers from Planning Commission. I reach out to them, and also Public Works with their road and bridge, where they were given the points for the equity zones. But there was a significant impact on including those categories in that policy. And that's an ongoing program. We also, one of the programs we implemented is what we're calling DEI drop-ins, which is where we're meeting with departments to talk to them about various initiatives so that they can see if it's applicable to any programs that they have to further expand utilization of existing best practices that we're doing.
Thank you. Sorry.
Just want to add to your question, we are a recipient of that.
Okay.
Those equity
Good.
zones, and I know more.
I like it. All right. Thank you very much, Director Lockett. Director, I'm sorry.
Well, real quick, I mean, we can talk offline. I don't know if this falls under your area, but with respect to health equity, you mentioned mental health. Is there a way that we can work with you to develop programming with respect to overall health equity of all county, employees?
Yes, definitely.
Education, screenings, things like that?
Yes, definitely. That would be excellent.
Okay.
Because as I mentioned, the number one was mental health and wellness.
Chair, just very quickly, as I get reports from other agencies throughout the region and state, I like to sometimes share them with committees that also do the work here locally. This morning, I had an opportunity to meet Director Jack Marchbanks, who's the Director of Ohio Department of Transportation. He's an African-American member of Governor DeWine's cabinet, and I thought his intentionality about DEIA is outstanding. I would recommend we at county go see him somehow, some way. His work to diversify what is traditionally a not-so-diverse engineering and construction, and Glenn knows as well. I just thought he's going straight to HBCUs, and he's bringing kids as fellows to Ohio from other markets with HBCUs, and kids are staying and working. And today they gave video testimony of their experiences at ODOT. But to see, first of all, ODOT District 12 regionally, this district starting to diversify more than it's traditionally been. I think you know this because didn't you once touch base with ODOT or in the infrastructure world? It's nice to see a director so intentional as his work goes. I would just encourage that we all maybe look more into Director Marchbank's work. I also want to say that we don't have to go out of our market to HBCUs to necessarily find, but intentionality was pretty cool at ODOT. Of all places, because sometimes ODOT doesn't get the best reputation. I just thought it was pretty neat when I heard that. Yeah, had you heard that? Oh, yeah, about their reputation. Not enough you knew Director Marchbanks. He would be a good speaker sometime for some group. I just want to mention that. So
You got his name here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Director Nemistill,
Yes,
is that correct?
that's
I
correct.
would be on that side. Thank you.
You're on my side.
All right, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is my first time before this council. My name is Sarah Nemistel, and I'm very honored and excited to be here today as the county's new Director of Human Resources, Chief Human Resources Officer. So a little bit about me, to use Clerk Bird's words, I'm a lawyer by trade. That's what she always says.
I do.
I attended and graduated from Cleveland Marshall College of Law in 2009. I joined the county in 2018 as an assistant law director in our law department in our labor and employment group. And in that role, I provided a lot of legal advice and counsel to the Department of Human Resources and to the various county agencies on personnel issues. Also, took the lead on negotiations for several of our county's collective bargaining agreements, including clerk of courts. And in June of last year, I made a big career transition. I accepted a position as the Administrator of Human Resources in our county's Sheriff's Department. And as of May 9th, I've had the privilege of serving now as the Director of HR under County Executive Ordains Administration. So just over 4 months. In terms of an update on our department and related diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, so our department actually has a very active diversity, equity, inclusion committee. It has been active and engaged long before I came on board, but it is co-chaired by Kimberly Coleman, who's here today. She's one of our HR managers, and Laura Cannon, who is with me as well. She is our records administrator. And one of the great initiatives that the committee started is the Can We Talk Conversations That Matter series of panel discussions. And in June, the committee hosted its second discussion, and the theme was Your Vote, Your Voice in light of the August 8th special election. The event highlighted the import of voting and featured our own Councilwoman Meredith Turner from District 9, who has been an election official with the Board of Elections and is committed to empowering civic engagement. Meredith Helmer, who is the president of the board of the Northeastern Ohio Voter Advocates and has coordinated voter registration within our correction center for many years, as well as Mike West, who is a longtime Board of Elections employee and currently serves as its manager of community outreach. We are very proud of Kim and Laura and all of our committee members for putting together this event, as voting is a fundamental part of our democracy and critical to advancing equity commission initiatives. Our committee will also be attending a DEI conference on October 25th at the Cleveland Museum of Art, which is a local event designed to explore the import of DEI, provide insight on how we can support DEI, and offer tools to foster inclusivity. So we're really excited about that as well. I'm also happy to report that we have added a new Director of Organizational and Employee Development to our team, Dr. Alita Moonen. Dr. Moonen and I have been working with Clerk Bird and Director Lockett in Tri-C to coordinate the DEI training that Director Lockett just spoke about for our county staff and leadership. Also, in a collaborative effort with the PRC, one of the things we're currently working on right now is changing our job postings. So most of the county's classifications have minimum qualifications. So you have to meet these qualifications to be eligible for the job. They're followed by an equivalency statement, which says, the qualifications can be satisfied with some sort of combination of education, training, and experience. And historically, we have not included the equivalencies on our job postings. So one of the things we started doing is working to include these equivalencies right in our job postings for classified positions. I'm hoping to get more applicants to apply for the jobs and hoping that people don't shy away from applying because they don't meet the minimum qualifications or they have concerns. So really trying to build inclusivity into those postings. Director Kopczynski of the Personnel Review Commission and Director Lockett and I are also looking into procuring text analyzer software, which is actually, it's really cool. But it's software that
that will review your job postings and your job descriptions for inclusive language. So it looks for unconscious bias in some of the terminology used, to have gender neutral postings and descriptions, and also it'll look at your job postings and your descriptions to make sure that they're not too long, or they're appetizing to all, because one of the things I learned in looking at this was that women tend to only apply to jobs for which they meet 100% of the minimum qualifications, whereas men will apply if they meet 60%.
I'm surprised it's 60.
So interesting. And looking at our classifications and postings, they do tend to be very long, and so we're really excited about hopefully procuring that software to incorporate DEI into our recruiting process. I know that this council has been instrumental in terms of the tuition reimbursement program. So I wanted to share some statistics with you. Since the advent of the program in the fall of 2022, we have had 52 employees apply for participation. For the classes completed in 2022, we processed 18 reimbursements so far, averaging about $1,800 per reimbursement. And for classes completed in 2023, so far, we have reimbursed, or in the process of reimbursing, 19 employees for an average payment of $1,000. One of the things that I would like to do as director is to really, start marketing our program a little bit better and encouraging employees to take advantage of it, because it really is a great benefit. In terms of my priorities, I sincerely believe that our employees are our most important asset, and I see HR's mission being to drive a diverse, equitable, and inclusive work environment where our employees feel valued, have a voice, and an opportunity to succeed and grow. And I know Executive Ronayne, he wants everybody to look back at their time here and say it was the best job they ever have, and I do too. So that's the kind of culture we are looking to build. In terms of DEI with human resources, I know the research shows that there's a direct link between organizations with diverse workforces and improved financial performance, engagement, and performance by the employees. So I'm committed to partnering with Director Lockett and her team and Clerk Bird to continue efforts to enhance DEI in our workplace. Also, I see a very important role of HR being to honor one of the sections of our charter, which is basically to make sure that when we make employment appointments, we ensure that the diversity of our population is reflected in our employees. So one of the things that I see HR doing is, we are here to review the county's personnel policies as well as our recruitment, hiring, and onboarding procedure with an equity lens to make sure that there aren't equity barriers there, preventing the enhancement of DEI in our workplace. Also, I really want to build our talent acquisition team to work directly with department leadership to establish recruitment plans for the various departments. And in doing that, I want to make sure we're looking at all cross-sections of the community, identifying priority applicants with an equity lens, building partnerships with our community stakeholders, our colleges and universities, and really thinking outside of the box as to how we can, build recruitment pipelines. For example, our youth aging out of foster care. They know the county, they've been with HHS. Is there a way to incorporate them into our workforce moving forward? And then regularly reviewing the effectiveness of our recruitment strategy to see if it's working, what we can do better, making sure there aren't equity barriers or obstacles, and then making sure our advertising reaches different cultural audiences.
Thank you, Director. Well done, both in terms of your discoveries to this point, being in the job for 4 months, and then to look forward. So thank you as well for applauding the efforts which were undertaken previously. They're growing some legs and developing sort of a good base, not only the reimbursement efforts, but some of the recruiting efforts. So thank you for acknowledging past successes and your ambitions going forward. Any questions? Glenn?
One around, I guess, cabinet or leadership from a diversity or standpoint, and is there a sense today of where that is around your cabinet or leadership team?
Yeah, I probably should take it. First of all, our cabinet is a large group of about 40 members now, so we hardly fit in this room, actually, we've had to move down here and still have chairs around the second aisle, if you will. It's been I think a great process to build a diverse team, and I'll reflect a little bit on two elements of that. One, at the Department of Health and Human Services, I have elevated what were formerly division directors to cabinet members. So now my Division of Children and Family Services director is a peer-to-peer cabinet director at the cabinet. That happens to be Jackie Fletcher, who we brought in as somebody who had experience and came up through the ranks. But that's senior and adult, that's children and family, that's family and children first, that goes on as a group. I bring that up because, I think part of the DEIA strategy is to get all the voices at different levels within a division. They're managing big budgets and lots of people, so happy to have HHS in full at our table. As far as persons who've recently been confirmed through council, and Councilwoman Conwell knows this, I'm proud of the panoply of people that are working with us. Jackie Fletcher is Director of Color. Sheriff Patel is Colombian native. He's the first Hispanic director or sheriff in the county's history. The first housing director in the county's history is African-American, Sarah Parks Jackson. A lot of you know her. My newest recruit at the 8th floor, we don't have C-suites, but just in proximate to the executive, is Jackie Woodard, African-American member of our cabinet. I said Jackie. Excuse me, Kelly's so new, I said Jackie. Don't tell her I said that. I have Jackie from another life in my mind.
She'll just watch the
Yeah,
video.
but Kelly, yeah, she probably is actually. Kelly Woodard, she came over from Cleveland Public Library and has been a great addition to our team. But Kelly is so new. She is our new communications director. I guess I'm just kind of rattling off new recruits. Chris Alvarado. Yeah, I can go through their demographic composition, but he's he's a member of our team that's going to be our regional collaboration czar, person of color, and I'm proud of the diversity of the group that we're building. These are new hires or new appointees that have been confirmed by cabinet, by council. So that's kind of our newest in the last 3-4 months. Partners that have joined us. Hope that helps.
Anywhere we can help?
Oh, absolutely. Boy, I know you have 20 minutes left in the meeting, Chair, so
I mean, I think it's important, and certainly to help round out what your vision is and to,
Yeah,
from a
and
leadership standpoint, help.
yes, and let me go to one very direct issue. By extension of the county cabinet are boards and commissions, and of the boards and commissions, this is I think a great representation of the diversity of our community, although we're, as somebody rightly said, it was Yanela Sims last meeting, we need to get persons who have immediate lived and learned experiences, so I've recommended at least one new member to this board, to the chair, that I think will add a lot to a very recent lived experience, somebody who's been incarcerated in their life at a long period of time. So I'm trying to get actually a little more of that, having learned from the discussion last time at this committee that there are everyday people who work in the worlds of, maybe in different worlds that we are always in. But for instance, transit riders for transit agencies. But I'm proud of my most recent appointments. There are boards that are like Metro. My most recent 3 recommendations are all persons of color, and there are also boards where I may have made 2 appointments of non-persons of color. But I think on the average, we are doing really well with our diversity of board appointments. having said that to your question, I've got over 50 boards and commissions to make appointments to, and I don't know everybody in this town, much as I'd like to think I do, I don't. You do, you know people I don't know, Reverend Chakra knows people, Levine knows people, you know, we're just going down the line. So if you have board members that could help fill board seats, we'd like to keep a bullpen of board member prospects, subject area experts, but also people that have everyday lived experiences.
So let's create,
Yeah.
share the roster of
Yeah.
commissions and appointments
Yeah.
and vacancies that might
Perfect.
exist there, and
Perfect.
then we will.
Does Zoe have that? I don't have
No,
that.
yeah, someone will have it, right, but the point is, let's.
Latia doesn't have
I
that.
know. I'm tapping you because we tap you for everything. All right, so, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
I
All
will
right.
share that.
All right,
follow-up.
so, yes.
I just wanted to make a quick
Councilwoman.
comment to Glenn's comment. It's not just necessarily having a culturally diverse person sitting in the seat. What we were working on, and this goes to Sarah, and we could talk on the sidebar, interim director Marshall and Lenora Lockett were working on pay equity amongst African Americans and others. So that's, you know, we have the seats. We just want to make sure that pay equity is fair across the board, and not just for who sits in the seats, but all our employees. So that would be my question to Sarah. I think it's Schedule A. We had completed Schedule B, which is, but A was what they were working on. So hoping that you're taking up into that work and continuing, because it's very important to me, myself, and as well as Councilwoman Turner.
Yes.
The right observation, thank you for that. Okay, so thank you both very much. Any House bill updates or
A couple of
any
others.
updates
May
in
I, or do you want me to send
legislature?
them
Please, no, go ahead.
remotely? I'll try to be quick. So this month, the Ohio Attorney General's office rejected the petition summary of a proposed state constitutional amendment that would modify legislation regarding redistricting process. The initiative was titled "An Amendment to Replace the Current Politician-Run Redistricting Process with a Citizen-Led Commission Required to Create Fair State Legislative and Congressional Districts Through a More Open and Independent System." The AG's office rejected the petition summary because the language submitted did not both fairly and truthfully summarize the proposed constitutional amendment. Instead, the AG identified misstatements and omissions that, as a whole, would, according to him, mislead a potential signer as to the actual scope and effect of the proposed amendment. Furthermore, the Ohio Redistricting Committee is scheduled to meet on September 13th of this year at the Ohio State House to begin redrawing new state legislative district boundaries for the 2024 election. It's the Commission's first meeting since May of last year, as if you'll recall, when Republican members voted to reapprove a state legislative plan that the Supreme Court rejected as illegally gerrymandered. The Supreme Court's ruling means new boundaries need to be drawn for next year's House and Senate elections. So we'll wait and see what comes out of this September meeting, which is live streamed on the Ohio channel. If you're interested, I will watch it for you all as well. Issue 1, very briefly, as you all know, a special election on Issue 1 was held in the state of Ohio on August 8th. Issue 1, if approved, just to review, would have raised the threshold for approving changes to the state constitution from a simple majority to now 60%. Additionally, if it had passed, the issue would have required citizen-initiated constitutional amendment campaigns to collect signatures from each of the 88 Ohio counties. And also, it would have eliminated the 10-day cure period to gather in additional signatures for citizen-initiated constitutional amendments if the original submission didn't have enough valid signatures. Our county executive was active in the campaign to say no to Issue 1. With over 3 million ballots cast, Issue 1 was defeated by a margin of 57%, or 1,744,094 no votes, to 43%, or 1,315,346 yes votes. All 8 urban counties, they sometimes are known as the Big 8. Some of you have been here in politics, these Big 8 urban counties, as they're like to be called, all voted against Issue 1. Here in Cuyahoga County, under the leadership of our executive and others, 76.5% of no votes were cast, which is really, really big for this special election. After the election, President Biden stated, in part, issue 1 was, quote, a blanket attempt to weaken voters' voices and further erode the freedom of women to make their own healthcare decisions. Ohioans spoke loud and clear, and tonight, democracy won. As always, I'll continue to keep you informed of other pertinent legislative matters.
Can't help myself, but just a couple of other data points on that. We are no longer the largest voting base in Ohio. It's Franklin County. The Franklin County Commissioner called me at 4 o'clock and said, who's it going to be? Who's going to be the largest vote turnout? I bet on Cuyahoga. We did outperform Franklin. We wanted both to perform, but we outperformed the largest number of votes to Nayla's point, largest no vote percentage. But I think just the most important point is that the turnout was there, which helps. You know, our engagement has been low, and we still need to work on it. The other thing I just wanted to reflect on is that if you look at the data, I don't know about you, I can never go to bed on election night, but I'm looking at all the crosstabs in other places. So 22 counties voted no on issue 1 of 88, so a quarter of our counties, but the counties that carried, in addition to the 8 that Nayla talked about, were all Lakeline counties from Ashtabula to Lucas, but that included Geauga, Lake, Lorraine, Medina, traditionally counties that we don't always see politically eye to eye. And the reason I bring this up is there's common ground there. And so my immediate epiphany was, could we find common ground on sensible gun laws and things like that? You know, where can we find in that trend of how we voted together more opportunity to work together? So,
thank you for that. And certainly this November, given what will be on the ballot, will be a furtherance of that thinking, right? If we show up, I don't know where you stand on the subject, but certainly we'll know the decision will be based upon, in large part, what happens in those lake surrounding counties.
To make matters more confusing, and it is, whether it's coincidence or other, it's issue 1 again, but some of you've heard the reframing is. So if you voted no and there's a no sign still in your yard, you might as well take it up because you wouldn't want to misinform a voter to vote.
Great, all right, so, thank you. So, Criminal Justice Subcommittee Chair, there's a vacancy, we'll talk about that in just a moment. We also have, as you know, Mr. McShepherd is not here for equitable quality of life. Any quick comments from you first, Dr. Gullett?
Not really. I can give a more robust summary at the next meeting.
Cool, I like that efficiency. Ms. Grimes?
I just would like the case members to know that this Communications Subcommittee has continued to meet during this time. We are rounding out some work we've been doing on an adult and youth toolkit for the community that will help further conversations on how racism is impacting residents. And we are continuing to work through the county's process in securing a vendor to conduct a survey with the community that would be something available in an ongoing way so that community members can continue to share their thoughts and impacts of racism, specifically systemic racism. So we're glad about that work continuing and invite those who might be interested to join us.
Mr. Cavanis is departed. All right, so that's briefer still. All right, so a few quick things and we will let you go in addition to always welcome Gary report.
You're going to make me send it.
I'm going to make you send it out.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you to send it out. All right, so,
You'll get that by email.
so you've heard us talk about funding that this council has to use discretionary, but certainly with approval, and we want to do it in the right way to further the work. We have some details that have to be ironed out, but the thinking from especially the subcommittee chairs is that we should consider a facilitator to help guide some of the work we're going to do going forward. Even create a strategy around this work. You know, we've had pieces and parts, right? The subcommittee approach works, but the pieces and parts approach we probably should rethink. And with that, if we go through the strategic process, then we also want to have someone facilitate that conversation so that we can begin the writings again. The report that we generated in 2020 was well received. 2020 and 2021 well received. Still, referred to in some circles to this day. That needs to be updated and refreshed. Whether that includes community conversations facilitated by someone, we do certainly want the community involved. That is something that's in need of a restart, and I think we'd all recognize that. So some of those funds will be used for that purpose. We're gonna be thoughtful, but we're also gonna make it impactful, right? More to come on that subject. Any questions? Not a lot of detail there, but any questions? All right. We have 5, including the 1 vacancy. You all know India Pierce Lee resigned when she retired from the Cleveland Foundation, now at Tri-C. So there's a vacancy there, but in addition, we have terms that ended 7/14/2023. Yeah, go ahead, hand it out. Janice Contreras, Dr. Gullett, Mr. McShepherd, and myself. We have heard affirmatively from at least 2 of the folks that they will renew their terms, so we're pleased with that. And we staggered these, remember, 5 individuals in each class, if you will, 23, 24, and 25, and 2 appointees by county council in Ellison's and Lillian Ross. So those, certainly there are terms, but they're just, those are council appointments. The final piece to this is with my term ending, and I am, if you guys and county councils oblige, happy to renew, but I will not renew as chair of the Citizens Advisory Council. And I hope you all will find some concurrence in the thinking from the subcommittee chairs that Ms. Grimes, Abiba Grimes, will be a superb choice to succeed me in this role. I can ask her to leave the room, certainly. I don't know that there's a need for formality around this because these are appointments. When I became chair, it was largely because the county executive then called me on a Sunday to say, hey, will you do this? Between whatever I was doing, no big deal, right? It was good. I said, yes. That's just me telling the truth. But we talked about it, and then you guys, again, concurred. So I am thoroughly excited that Ms. Grimes is open to the idea. And I think she'll be a wonderful leader. Again, I get to sit in the back somewhere, and I think it's time for a restart that makes sense. So any questions? Do you want to take a step out or comment before you?
The only thing I just want to say is thank you all for the opportunity to learn and grow together. This is massive work, and collective work is the most powerful work in my mind. So I'm happy to step out and.
Please, yeah, just so people can
let you
speak
all
nicely and badly about you.
Or make another record.
And Chair, I just want to say for the public and those who might be viewing, we were all either
Yeah.
suggested to be on this by.
Yeah, the charter
County.
speaks for itself, so we all had to be approved by the county council, certainly. But this particular decision
Yeah.
isn't driven by that process.
I just want to clarify
Yeah,
that
yeah,
that is
no,
a formal
no,
process
this-
for the
this-
public to be aware of.
Any,
It's just the
any
chair.
thoughts from folks?
I think Habiba would be great, so I would fully endorse her leadership, and thank you for yours.
No, thank you.
I don't know enough about her, so I just want, no objection, but how do we come to this choice?
Yeah, no, that's fair. It's a few things. It's engagement, certainly, and she has poured herself into the work that she has done. Obviously, we want smarts in the equation, right? And she's got that in abundance. And then I think ultimately, I talk about driving some initiatives forward. I'm the first to say that things have fallen off over some period of time because we haven't restarted, and that I have to take responsibility for. She has certainly stepped up to say, I'm willing to restart these efforts so that they are propelled in a way that makes us all proud of this county.
Thank you.
So,
And I can also speak that she's incredibly collaborative and always seeking to learn more from diverse voices. So I would be delighted to be able to work with her in that capacity.
And I'd also echo from a member of the communications committee, her leadership has been fantastic, really great. You guys given some of the things you talked about from the community conversations and the handbook toolkit for youth and adults. Some of the reporting, communication, in a good way.
Is there 2 people or only 1 person being considered?
no, these are fair governance questions.
I don't want to, I'm not objecting.
Right,
I'm
right.
just trying to
This
get
is the first
educated.
time we've had a chance, he's our inaugural chair.
Right, so-
We don't have a track record.
Right. So, yeah, process should be, we've had these conversations inside of smaller groups, right? So process certainly should be formalized so that just what you're asking, people have not black box activity, but transparency. So I'm 100% in agreement. So yes, we considered other names, talked about all those different things, and here's where we arrive for your consideration.
When
do think it makes sense to, ask somebody who has been in as a chair of a subcommittee, and so that's a natural, move. I also think that, and she runs a sizable nonprofit, is very well respected in the nonprofit community, which I think is a very important community for this group to be tapping into, so that's also, a plus.
And I understand this is feels dropped, right? I get it for some of you, and for that I apologize. I'd hope to have a more thorough conversation, but this is.
You're looking to get out, I can see
This
that.
is sort of how things are from time to time. And again, the formality of county appointments, it doesn't apply here.
Yes.
Right, this is a self-led situation. Okay. Any other questions? Those in favor? Aye. Any abstentions
You need
before I
a
ask for the
motion.
notice?
Need a motion?
You probably need a motion.
Well, dang,
Okay,
once again.
motion
Yes,
second.
right, yeah.
So the motion, just so we're clear,
Yeah, just so we're clear.
do
My
we
fault.
have a motion to appoint Viva Grimes as chair
I
of
thought
the
my
Citizens
conversation was motion, but I get
Advisory Council on Equity beginning?
So moved. Second.
Okay,
So having moved in second, is there any further discussion?
now you stepped too far.
Well, it's Robert's rules.
I'm joking. I'm
Seeing no further discussion, yes, thank you, Councilwoman.
Are there any objections?
All in
Any nays?
favor?
Aye.
Any objections?
I have no objection, but Mr. Chair, you beg your indulgence, I just think, once again, we should.
Wait, motion carries.
Motion carries, thank you. Let's extend this clap also for Chairman Taylor, we appreciate you. Thank you for being the inaugural chair. Yeah.
All right, well,
Peaceful transition of power.
there we go.
Yeah.
Imagine that. All right, congratulations.
You don't get to sit there.
We have one person we're considering for a replacement for one of the vacancies. That detail certainly has to be vetted by county council. They have to approve, but there are names in play. We will add more names to the equation, as you said. Vacancies are a part of this process, okay? So if you have suggestions, once again, throw them to Clerk Bird and to the county executive, and they will be considered. All right.
I will send the GARE update, which is so riveting, by email tomorrow morning. Hopefully Habiba will let me share them in person. Becomes
Better leadership, that's what we're talking.
Mystic,
Thank you
yeah.
all very much, appreciate it. Yes, we have it on the, no, we don't have it on the calendar. We'll send out,
We don't have a
and Ms. Grimes will send out the information.